after 5 loyal years building a product that could revolutionize his industry. Ethan Ross expected recognition, he got betrayal instead. When his manipulative manager passed him over for a promotion and stole credit for his innovation, Ethan didn't confront him. He vanished quietly, taking with him the very idea that could make or break the company. But Ethan didn't just walk away, he walked straight into the arms of the competition. What follows is a silent war of strategy, ethics, and corporate revenge, where silence becomes more devastating than outrage. And justice isn't loud but undeniable. 5 years. That's how long I gave them. Not just time, but every fiber of my thought, every ounce of my energy, and every drop of belief that loyalty would eventually be rewarded. I wasn't naive, I knew corporate wasn't a family, but I believed in merit, in system, in the quiet justice of results. I was wrong. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of gray, rain-spattered day that feels like a bad omen even before the sky cracks open. I was sipping lukewarm coffee in the break room when the news came. Promotion announced, Derek's moving up. That was it. No email, no meeting, no explanation, just a whisper wrapped in a smirk. Derek Martin, my direct manager, the same man who 6 months ago told me my prototype needed more time in the oven, who laughed at the demo slides I stayed up 3 nights polishing, the man who never once wrote a line of code, yet somehow presented my architecture as a collective team vision in front of the board. And now, he was the director of innovation. The irony was almost poetic. I didn't storm into his office. I didn't demand answers. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I walked back to my desk, opened a spreadsheet, and deleted a single column of figures, my sandbox variables, the ones only I understood. Then I logged out. Permanently. What they didn't know was this: the project wasn't finished. What they saw in the demo, it was a shell. The core algorithm, the adaptive engine that would make it truly valuable, was never uploaded to the company server. I had kept that part offline, not out of malice, out of instinct. I'd built it, alone, on weekends and nights. I called it Prism, a real-time, behavior-driven optimization engine that could slash operational costs by 27% without a single layoff. If implemented right, it would change everything. That's why I showed it to them. That's why I stayed loyal. But they didn't want to invest. They wanted to absorb, rebrand, assign credit upwards. And now, Derek wore a new suit paid for by the bones of my invention. I didn't resign that day. I ghosted, took sick leave, let HR calls go to voicemail. 2 weeks later, I sent a formal notice with no explanation. No bridge burned, no revenge speech, just a clean break. But I wasn't done. I spent the next month refining Prism. Not for them, but for myself. I renamed modules, rewrote syntax, patented the key sequence. I moved quietly, filing paperwork under an LLC registered to a P.O. box in Vermont. No LinkedIn posts. No startup buzz. Just progress and silence. And then I reached out to the one person I knew would understand exactly what they'd missed. Alex Monroe, CEO of Virion Technologies. Derek's worst nightmare. Alex had once called our firm a legacy dinosaur, playing dress up in a tech hoodie. He wasn't wrong. Where Derek wore ambition like cologne, Alex wore it like armor, quiet, exacting, and impossible to fool. When I showed him Prism, he didn't blink. He asked only one question: how fast can you scale this? That's when I knew I had already won. They didn't notice my absence at first. Corporate inertia is funny that way. When someone who's too quiet leaves, people assume they're just in another room, another Zoom call, another department. It buys you time to disappear without raising alarms, time to prepare the next move while they're still refreshing inboxes waiting for your reply. By the time they realized I was gone, I was already in Virion's R&D bunker, deep in the heart of Santa Clara, standing before a whiteboard with Alex Monroe and 2 of his top engineers. There were no suits here, no pretense, just minds focused on execution. Prism was no longer a concept. They had made it priority 1, and I was listed as lead architect, not support, not team contributor. Lead, but ghosts don't stay buried quietly. 3 weeks after we finalized the first integration plan, I received an unexpected email. Not from Derek, he would never reach out directly. It was from a mid-tier legal rep at my old firm, a vague, passive-aggressive inquiry asking if I had retained any company property after my departure. I read it twice, then smiled. They were sniffing. They hadn't seen the real product, but they could sense the value had vanished with me. Someone in the upper floors had finally asked the question, "Where's the rest of the code?" And now they were trying to bait me into revealing it. I didn't respond. Instead, I began documenting dates, emails, code commits, my personal laptop logs, the Git history. I knew how these games were played. The goal wasn't justice, it was pressure, make me sweat, make me second guess, but I was past fear. All I needed was facts. That's when I found something. Buried in a shared server archive, months old, was a version of my code that Derek had quietly renamed under his initials. A test branch, unfinished, sloppy, but undeniably mine. He had taken fragments before my departure, tried to reverse engineer what he didn't understand. He didn't know I had seen it. He didn't know I had screen captures of the timestamps, the channel logs, the login credentials. This wasn't just about theft anymore. It was about the cover dash up at VRN. We kept pushing forward. Alex knew the stakes now. We're not just launching a product, he said. We're launching a statement. He wasn't interested in petty revenge. Neither was I, but the lines were being drawn, and I could feel the narrative tightening. Back at my old firm, they were in damage control. I heard from a former colleague off the record that Derek had begun speaking in half-truths, saying Prism was inspired by collective brainstorming sessions, that my departure was amicable, that the firm was pursuing parallel innovation paths. It was all positioning, laying the groundwork for plausible deniability. They were scared, and they should be, because the real product was weeks away from debuting at one of the biggest industry expos on the West Coast. Varian had locked the keynote slot. Alex had written the speech himself and the final slide. A reveal of the algorithm's origin story with credits. My name. Full screen. I hadn't gone looking for a war, but I was ready to finish it. I learned early that the loudest person in the room rarely wins in the long run. Noise invites scrutiny. But shadows get to move freely, to listen, to plan. And I had spent the last few months walking quietly, collecting threads. Now it was time to weave them into something sharp. The announcement of Prism's public debut at the West Coast Tech Expo sent a quiet ripple through the industry. No name dropping, no drama, just a line at the bottom of the press release, featuring the debut of a proprietary adaptive optimization engine by Ethan Ross. That was enough. I knew Derek would see it. I also knew his reaction wouldn't be rage, would be calculation. And I was right. A week later, a cease and desist letter arrived. Long, bloated with legalese, alleging misappropriation of proprietary development assets. It claimed Prism was derivative of internal R&D efforts, meaning, of course, his Frankenstein clone of my early code. The letter was meant to intimidate, but its very existence revealed something better: desperation. I didn't reply personally. Varian's legal team handled it with surgical precision, neutral in tone, deadly in implication. Attached was a full audit log of Prism's development timeline, complete with patent filings, hashed commit histories, and proof of first use, long before Derek's team brainstorming sessions had even started. It was a scalpel disguised as paperwork. But I wasn't done playing defense. There was something poetic about using their own architecture against them. During my final months at the company, I had kept meticulous notes, partly out of habit, partly out of a growing sense that something wasn't right. I knew Derek was hiding inefficiencies, fudging metrics. But now, I had the motive to dig deeper, and I found it. 2 years ago, Derek had overseen a failed pilot project called Orion, quietly shelved after burning through a 6-figure budget. The failure was buried in layered reporting, as market realignment expenses, but in the metadata, in version histories, and internal memos, it was clear. He'd falsified benchmarks, pitched incomplete tech. He'd salvaged his reputation by scapegoating contractors, and no one ever checked twice. Until now. I packaged everything into a confidential dossier, timestamped reports, source backups, a signed testimonial from a former engineer laid off during Orion's collapse, and handed it to Varian's corporate affairs team, not for revenge, for leverage, because as Prism neared launch, we knew the battle wouldn't be fought in courtrooms or expos. It would be fought in backchannels, in whispers, in the way investors talked behind closed doors, in the questions analysts asked during earnings calls. Perception was power, and Derek's empire had cracks. The day before the expo, I stood in a rehearsal hall reviewing my keynote slides. The final one was a single line of code, clean, elegant, unmistakably mine. Alex approached quietly. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. "Let's turn the lights on." Because I knew now, justice doesn't always wear a badge or carry a verdict. Sometimes, it arrives in silence, in the unraveling of lies, in the erosion of false thrones. In the moment, the truth stops whispering and starts speaking. Tomorrow, the lights would go up. And Derek would have nowhere left to hide. The expo floor buzzed with anticipation. This was no ordinary product reveal. Varian had kept the details tightly under wraps, and the tech world was salivating over what adaptive optimization actually meant. Alex Monroe knew how to build tension. He paced the presentation like a conductor before an orchestra. But when the lights dimmed and the Prism logo appeared on screen, the room fell into a hush. I stepped up. I didn't start with code or diagrams. I started with a question. How much waste is hidden in your systems right now, behind dashboards, beneath outdated metrics, buried under egos? A few eyebrows raised. I had their attention. For the next 20 minutes, I guided them through Prism's architecture, how it analyzed behavior patterns, optimized operations in real time, and reduced overhead without sacrificing jobs. I didn't say it out loud, but everyone in the room could see it. This wasn't just software. It was a reckoning. And then came the final slide. A single line of code. The Genesis commit. Timestamped. Signed with my digital key. This, I said, was written 2 years ago, in my apartment, on my own time. It started as a question. What if we didn't have to choose between innovation and integrity? Prism is the answer. Applause was immediate. Not wild, but deep professionals recognizing something real. But the real impact wouldn't be seen in claps. It would be in the ripple effect by evening. Tech blogs were ablaze. Silent Engineer surfaces with game-changing tech. Industry Insider debuts optimization tool amid corporate feud. My name was everywhere. But more importantly, Derek's wasn't. Not in the credits, not in the patents, not in the narrative. And then the hammer dropped. The following morning, Varian's press team released the Orion dossier quietly, precisely, with no editorializing, just facts. Falsified test reports, audit inconsistencies, whistleblower statements. They didn't accuse, they illuminated. Within hours, Derek's name began trending for the wrong reasons. I watched it unfold from a quiet hotel room, not out of vindictiveness but clarity. He had built his career on borrowed vision and suppressed voices, and now, his silence was a vacuum. Investors demanded answers. Executives distanced themselves. HR statements were drafted, and he vanished from the org chart overnight. No ceremony, no farewell, just gone. That afternoon, I received a message, a simple one-liner from a former colleague still at the firm. You did it without screaming. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just justice for me, it was a lesson for every unseen builder, every overlooked contributor, every person who ever watched their work get paraded around by someone who never understood it. You don't have to raise your voice to change the story. You just have to own your truth and present it when the world is watching. Derek wanted credit. I wanted clarity. Only one of us got what we came for. Justice, I've learned, rarely arrives with a gavel. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It echoes slowly, relentlessly through rooms and reputations. Through board meetings and whispered calls, until what was hidden becomes too loud to ignore. By the time the dust settled, Prism wasn't just a product, it was a signal. And I had become a name associated not with revenge but with clarity. 3 weeks after the launch, Varian secured 2 government contracts. Industry players who once dismissed my ideas now wanted to license my framework. I didn't rush, I listened. For the first time in years, I had the luxury of choice, and I chose carefully. We formed a quiet partnership with a nonprofit that had been struggling to streamline their operations. No press release, no strategic branding, just implementation. I wanted Prism to prove itself where results, not headlines, mattered most. Derek, on the other hand, disappeared from the industry altogether. He wasn't fired, he resigned, according to a vague corporate statement about personal focus and growth. But everyone knew. The resignation was a cover. His LinkedIn went dark. His old team was reassigned. A reorg swept through the department like a winter wind. One night, I received a message from someone I hadn't expected. Marcus, a junior developer from my old team. He had been quiet during the Derek years, too careful, too green to speak up. But now, he wrote, your talk made me stay in tech. I thought it was always going to be like that place. You proved it doesn't have to be. I sat with that message for a long time, longer than I'd sat with any contract or strategy doc, because that's what all of this had been about, not just proving a point, but proving a path. I had been tempted, more than once, to retaliate in the way people expect from stories like these. Public shaming, loud denouncement, but I kept remembering the silence that greeted me the day I was passed over, the clean cut of it, the clarity. That's what I wanted to give back, not noise, just truth, placed carefully where it would be seen. The real win wasn't Prism's adoption or Derek's fall. It was the change in tone, the subtle shift in how engineers were credited at conferences, how innovation reports started citing contributors by name, how people like McQuiet builders were beginning to get their share of the light. I still walk carefully. I don't seek headlines, I don't try to own the narrative. I just build. But now I build with full ownership. Not just of the product, of the story. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't punishment, it's presence. Not disappearing into silence, but choosing when and where to speak. And knowing that when you do, the echo will carry further than any scream. That's how I took back what was mine, and that's how I made sure they never stole anything from me again.